Hey everybody, welcome back to Only Stupid Answers. My name is DJ Wooldridge, and unfortunately, Sam is not with me today, but in his place, we have a wonderful guest, Miss Clarke Wolfe. Clarke, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm hanging in there. How are you?
I'm also hanging in there. That seems like that's what we're all doing, is just kind of hanging in there. But I want to thank you for joining us to talk Doom Patrol. You're a big fan of Doom Patrol. And so I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this season. But before we get into all that, for the kids at home that might not know where you're from, I feel like they probably all do, considering the audience we bring in. But in case they don't, where can they find you? What are you up to?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Clarke Wolfe, Clarke with an E, Wolf with an E. And man, I'm a free agent right now, and I'm loving it. It's great. I just the final episode of my show DC Daily will be airing on Friday, July 3rd. So I'm not sure when we'll go live with this, but same day probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So you can check it out on YouTube or on the DC Universe platform. Our show is actually in front of the paywall.
Okay.
So you don't have to have a membership in order to watch DC Daily. And our guest for our penultimate episode was April Bowlby.
Nice.
Who is
Great.
Rita Farce.
Yep.
So yeah, so if your audience is interested, she is always a delight.
Awesome.
And we talked a lot about this season of Doom Patrol, and so I think they would love some of that insight from her.
100%, and especially after watching this episode, because this is every cast member on the show I think is an MVP. I'm always impressed with everybody, including the actors who are in costume for like Robot Man and Mr. Negative. But like this is a good episode for Rita. Yeah. So let's dive into it. This is season 2, episode 4, Sex Patrol, when the Dannyzens throw a massive party at Doom Manor to resuscitate Danny the Brick. Dorothy longs to join the festivities and experience life as a grown-up. As the party rages on, Rita asks Flex Mentallo, guest star DEVAN Chandler Long, to help unleash her full potential, which has some dangerously racy consequences. And this episode is directed by Omar Mata, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, and is written by Erica Deedle and Tanya Steele. I'm assuming no relation to Cliff Steele.
The Cliff.
Yeah, no relation to Cliff. So we talked a little bit about on air, and people that checked out our last review, that I'm a huge fan of this show. I'm a fan. I've been currently reading Grant Morrison's run, which this show owes a big debt to. But those first 3 episodes kind of felt like they were just trying to get the engine going again. They were kind of investing in this show has always had a sense of tragedy to it, but it was kind of like spending a little extra time there. And when this episode began, I was a little worried it was more of the same, but it was not. It was not. So for you, Clarke, what have your feelings on the season so far been, and what were your feelings going into this episode?
So anybody who has, watched DC Daily or, knows anything about me, I love Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol season 1 was, probably my favorite thing on the platform. And that might be including the Harley Quinn animated series, which is outstanding. Yes. But Doom Patrol felt like a show made just for me. It was like, it's so weird and yet so heartfelt.
Yeah.
I think it is really, it's not easy to do what Doom Patrol does, playing with tone, playing with expectations, etc. So far this season, I will admit that I was missing Mr. Nobody.
Same.
I thought that he was, because, not only is Alan Tudyk amazing, of course, but the thread of season 1, a lot of that was sort of pulling the strings, right? Mr. Nobody, even if we had a villain of the week, Mr. Nobody was kind of always behind it, messing with the Doom Patrol psyche, getting into that character stuff, revealing what Niall's ulterior motives might have been.
Yeah.
So I will say, though, once I sort of got into the first 3 episodes, I did feel like the character stuff felt familiar. It just was sort of less guided, like less specified. But I will also say, and I liked that. For instance, Cyborg, I love his relationship with this woman.
Yeah.
I think that is a great thing to see for his character. I think, the two of them together are wonderful. And so I enjoyed bits of that. this episode, Danny the Street, Danny the Brick, we love them. And now we're back into that very queer, very weird, very authentic atmosphere. And that to me is what Doom Patrol, the series, is all about.
100%. And I the thing that affected me most in those first 3 episodes was when Dorothy dropped the brick and it broke. I was surprised at the amount of emotional investment I had in the brick. I was like, oh no. So I'm glad right off the bat we deal with it. And of course, Danny was one of the standouts last season. And so bringing them back, even in a small way, because we get a little bit of the showroom from when Danny was full street. And we get morally corrupt back, who's great. And I think I especially love her interaction with Cyborg, because it's one thing that she's interacting with the other characters, but I think Cyborg of our team seems to be the most straight-laced, the most traditional hero. And so the rapport he has with Morally Corrupt, I think, is really cool to see. And I liked this struck the balance I like, where we're dealing with these characters, we're dealing with their trauma, but we're allowing them to have fun, and we're allowing to, even in I think one of the best balanced lines of funny and sadness was when somebody comes up to dance up to Negative Man, and they're like, what about these bandages? He's like, well, if you pull them off, everybody in this room would die. Like they would melt and die. And it was one of those, it was funny, but it's sad. And it's like, I feel like this is where the show is at its best.
I agree. That line stood out to me. Absolutely. And on top of that, I will also say that the scene, so Doom Patrol is a show that makes me laugh. Mm-hmm. It's a show that makes me grossed out, like The Beard Hunter.
Yes.
And it's a show that makes me go, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Whether it is like, Ezekiel or Admiral Whiskers, or in the beginning of this season, Cliff fighting the rats, which was amazing. But it also is a show that makes me cry. Yeah. And I legit cried during Dorothy's during Dorothy's song last night. Not only is Pure Imagination a beautiful song,
100%,
but it is also so incredibly perfect for the symbolism of Danny the Street and all of the people that are trying to make the world different and bring magic into the world. And it truly touched me in my heart. And that's, again, this is Doom Patrol. Mm-hmm. This is what Doom Patrol does.
100%. And so not only do we get Danny returning to a degree, and we get Morally Corrupt, played by Alan Mingo Jr., but we have Flex Mentallo return, as we said in the thing, played by DEVAN Chandler Long. And I was actually trying to tell my wife what happened in the episode. And it's in those moments that you realize how much weird is layered into the show. Because then you're explaining Danny the Street, and then you start explaining Flex and how he changes reality through his muscles. Anyway, so Rita sees this, and this whole season she's been trying to control her body so she can become a hero. Yes. And so she, as we saw last season, Flex is able to flex a specific muscle that brings joy, let's say, to the people in the vicinity. And so she wants to use that to learn to control herself. And that has the unintended consequence of waking up, I guess, a sex demon in Nepal that thus brings out the quote unquote sex men who are there to, I guess, keep wild sexual energy from happening. And once this started going, I'm like, yeah, Doom Patrol. Like, we got the terrible Dr. Time a couple episodes ago, but that felt like it was shuffled off into a corner. Like we didn't feel like we spent a lot of time with it. Like this was like, this is what I'm here for. Yes. And they're like sex Ghostbusters, basically.
Yes, exactly.
And what's interesting for people that have read Grant Morrison's run, you won't be surprised, or familiar with Grant Morrison's work, you won't be surprised that these come from his run.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. The sex demon, Shadowy Mr. Evans, was created by Grant Morrison and Richard Case, and they first showed up in Doom Patrol number 47 back in 1991. And the sex men showed up in Doom Patrol 48, the next issue, also in 1991. And something I like about this show is, as weird as this is, it is actually nowhere near as weird as it is in the comic. But instead of that and part of that is like the sex men in the comics have like blue pyramid heads and stuff like that. It's just a whole thing. But what I like what the show does is instead of like having that be a handicap, they find new ways to invest that energy. So it's like, okay, so we can't make them blue triangle headed ginormous guys. So what if they're like sex Ghostbusters? And what if we can't do this full weird thing? What if we ground some of the weird stuff in either stuff or something that's relatable to our characters? And I think that's what elevates this adaptation.
That's the thing is that, doing a successful adaptation isn't always as simple as just being like, well, take what is exactly on the page and put it on the screen. And I think that's why the show is so successful because, for instance, recently a friend of mine who has HBO Max.
Yeah.
Said to me, like, I'm looking for a new show to binge. Like, I was like, you should try Doom Patrol. And he did, and he totally fell in love with it. Has never read a comic book in his life. Yeah. But loves genre storytelling, loves fantasy, loves horror, all of that. And so my point is that I think, this writing team led by Jeremy Carver, they are doing the impossible, but I think it comes from a deep understanding of these characters, of the intention, and making the world still be weird and still give all of those nods to Grant Morrison's original weirdness, or at least from that run. Yeah. Weirdness, but also making it palatable to, an audience who would be watching HBO Max.
Exactly. And I do hope now that this is on HBO Max and reaching out kind of a broader audience, I hope people watch it. Like I wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind if Doom Patrol got some of that like real HBO money. You know what I mean? Like the money they're throwing into like Perry Mason and stuff. It's like, this show's earned it, I feel like. And I feel like it could use it in ways that no other show would, I think is safe to say.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that, Doom Patrol was a show that I think made sense for the DC Universe platform. Yes. However, it was not tights and capes, right? It wasn't Titans. It wasn't like your traditional procedural like Swamp Thing. Yeah. And yet it was one of the best reviewed shows on the streaming platform. Absolutely. And so I am actually, it is a strange twist of fate. I do happen to know that Doom Patrol was almost done shooting. They had one episode left. When COVID shut everything down. So, on the one hand, it's like, well, how are they going to do this? Perhaps they will put Alan Tudyk in front of a green screen and find a way to wrap up this season. I don't know that for sure. This is my wishful thinking. Yes. But the point is, the happy accident is that it is the only thing that's done. And so it was able to be a huge flagship push from HBO Max. Yeah. And I don't know if it necessarily, because it is so weird and because it is this like kind of outlier, I don't know if it would have gotten that same push had it not been the only thing done. So my fingers are crossed that will lead to increased visibility. People who watched Watchmen, let's say. Now, don't get me wrong, Doom Patrol and Watchmen are not the same, but if an HBO audience is open to a legitimate, serious take on weird superheroes, then maybe some of them will find Doom Patrol as well. And to your point, we will get a season 3 that has some HBO money. Well, and to play off of that with the idea that, okay, so if they had one episode to produce, one hopes that's like, oh, we still have that one episode. Well, I guess we have to give them a season 3 so they could just do the last few episodes. Like, yeah, please do that. Please. Because there is nothing really like it. There's other superhero shows that kind of like, that don't match this kind of balance with genuine, not just fainting at weirdness, like genuine strangeness. Because like we talked about, Shadowy Mr. Evans is feeding off sexual energy and it has a baby. And if the baby cries, every baby in the world will die. And I like when every bit with Cliff
being high. Like,
oh my God, that was so funny.
Props to Brendan Fraser and his voice work I like that even though Brendan Fraser and Matt Bomer are voice acting, I like that you can tell that they care, that they're like invested in it. And every time when he's like, I'm high, it's like you could feel it and it was exuberant. But even though he's not the only one not affected by this orgasm energy that's happening, it's actually Jane. And I believe for most of the episode, we see Scarlet Harlot, which we've seen in the underground, but I don't think has been in the surface ever before.
I don't remember her in the surface before.
Yeah, I think she's new to the surface, but every time there's a new Jane, it's always a new version of Jane. It's always interesting to see, but I believe it's Jane herself that ends up saving the day and just puts the baby back, just puts it back.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love Jane. And I feel like we spent a lot of time with Jane in season 1, and all of her various personalities in season 1. And I definitely want to see more of that. But I am also loving that we're spending more time with Rita this season.
Yes.
Rita is one of my favorite characters. April Bowlby, who plays her, is a lovely human being. Good. And also, for the record, so different than that character.
Interesting.
Oh my God, she is so different in real life. She's like, like bubbly and blonde and just like super, like she's just so light on her feet and airy and lovely. And
that's great.
And Rita is so it's just a testament to April's performance. But I do love how we're getting into like why Rita is the way that she is and some of this horrible trauma, and her, because we see a quick glimpse of her family in season 1. Yeah. But not like this. And so that was definitely some interesting context to bring to her character for sure.
Absolutely. And again, it's tough when you talk about standouts, like she's obviously standout. But Diane Guerrero as Jane, it's like everybody, when they're given their moment to shine, they rise to it and surpass it. But this was a great episode for her. Her interactions with Flex were wonderful, and it was one of those, like, knowing how sad both of their pasts are, it's like you all could be you should get together. I think it would work out. Right? I think it would work out. I think you should be together.
I do not disagree.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that that's where we were going, but then when Flex kind of like hopped back into Danny and went along with the Dannyzens, like, whatever. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention with respect to that, or with respect to Rita, is I am loving Rita's relationship with Dorothy this season.
Yeah.
I think that there's a whole lot of rich material there. And I have to say, in the end of the episode, when she said what she said to Dorothy, it absolutely broke my heart.
Same.
It was so, and it was a moment that landed with me, but also felt a little out of place. Maybe because I didn't see, like, I couldn't tell if Rita was drunk or if she was just exhausted or in a weird mind space from everything that had just happened. But it did feel, because I know Rita can be brash and like kind of brusque and tough, but I didn't expect her to say that to Dorothy, especially based on their moment earlier. And it was very sad, and it made me sad. So,
Yeah, hopefully we get some resolution with that, because Dorothy's going through it. We get a lot of her interactions with the candle maker, who in the comics, I don't know if I want to dive too much into what it is in the comics until we know more about what Candlemaker's deal is in the show. But it looks like instead of less of the abstract idea it represents in the comics, more of the personal idea of Dorothy's growth and this kind of like a negative version of wanting to grow up. And I appreciated Danny's honesty with Dorothy about their relationship, and where we end with Danny is a hint towards, obviously the show's very heavily based on Grant Morrison's run, but with the tire, it seems like we're leading towards Danny World, where Danny is an ambulance, and that was in Gerard Way and Nick Darrington's more recent Doom Patrol run. And it was cool to see this idea of evolving and growing, and I kind of hope something like that feels like what the season's been missing, like a hook. Like, this season is about these characters growing. It's like, yes, let's do that. Let's invest in that idea.
Yes, I would agree with that because something that I loved about season 1 of Doom Patrol is Mr. Nobody, not only Mr. Nobody and his arc and his through line and him pulling the strings like we talked about earlier, but also honestly the middle finger to superhero television. Like that, it was so perfectly executed. It was so like, wasn't too much.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, like, all right, we get it. But it also was having fun with the fact of like, yeah, this is a Greg Berlanti show technically, right? and having a little fun with that. And so I do agree with you, like the hook, the through line, whatever it is this season, I think isn't as well or clearly established as it was in season 1 via Mr. Nobody.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that Mr. Nobody shows back up. Even I've suggested this. I'm always a sucker for when like, the bad guy has to join the good guys and become part of the good guy team. Like if he's even like kind of depowered and has to team up with the Doom Patrol, any excuse to bring Tudyk as Mr. Nobody back, I will take and I will accept happily.
Agreed. Agreed.
So for me, if I were to rate this episode, I would give this probably a 9.5. Like this is reminds me of some of my favorite episodes in season 1, and it makes me really hopeful for as sad as it is to hear that they weren't able to film their last episode. It makes me hopeful to see where the rest of this season goes. So Clarke, do you have any other final thoughts, and what would you rate this episode?
Oh boy. I mean, it would definitely be up there for me as well. I think another thing that is so special, one of my favorite episodes in season 1 was when we went to Danny the Street and when Larry performed his karaoke and that beautiful, empowered moment of just celebrating our own weirdness in every shape, way, shape, and form. And so this episode felt reminiscent of that to me. It felt like a big pride party, which I loved. And so, yeah, I agree. I really hope that, we're headed in this direction for the rest of the season too. And I would say I would rate it in the 9s as well. I'd give it a 9. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So, Clarke, before we go, if you want to remind everybody where they can find you and what you're up to.
Absolutely. So I'm up to nothing.
You know what? No, good for you. Good for you. You do you.
Doing nothing right now. No, I actually am about to. Well, by the time they see this, I'll be in Atlanta, and hopefully, I'll be showing up on Doom Patrol because they shoot it in Atlanta.
See, that would be amazing.
That's what I'm doing. I'm moving to Atlanta.
You're friends with April. Give her a call.
Right?
Yeah.
No, but you can find me at Clarke Wolfe, Clarke with an E, Wolf with an E on Instagram and Twitter. Hopefully in the next couple of months, all things considered, I'll be showing up on your TV somewhere.
And you can follow me at DJ Talks Trash. You can follow our podcast and our show at Only Stupid Answers on Twitter. Yank out the vowels from stupid. We got new podcasts dropping every Monday. And of course, reviews for Doom Patrol and Stargirl dropping every week. So stay tuned for all of that. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Check out our Patreon because that's what keeps the lights on. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.